They smiled as they handed me nursing home papers to steal my company, entirely unaware that the man who built an empire always knows exactly how to tear it down. At 68 years old, I bitterly realized that blood ties aren't always a guarantee, but sometimes the most vicious blade stabbing you right in the back. I am Henrik, a man who spent half a widowed lifetime building a multi-million-dollar tech empire from scratch. That night, in the middle of Oslo's most luxurious restaurant, the suffocating air, smelling of smoked salmon and expensive perfume, was suddenly torn apart. My son and daughter smiled, a perfectly trained, hypocritical smile, then coldly slid a medical power of attorney and nursing home paperwork across the table. "Sign it, Dad. This is the best thing for the family." They arrogantly thought I was just a senile old man, a stumbling block that needed to be cleared away so they could hijack an $80 million company buyout they were secretly arranging behind my back. They stripped away all the dignity of a father, backing me into a dead end with no way out. But their blind arrogance made them forget one thing. The man who creates an empire always knows how to tear it down. They didn't even know that, behind my enduring silence, a massive net had been quietly cast, a secret with the power to crush their entire lives and delusions in the blink of an eye. Before I tell you how I buried that betrayal, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about what impressed you the most in this story. The cold howling whined out on the fjord whipped freezing gusts against the thick-tempered glass, blending with the crackling sound of half-burned pine wood in the fireplace. At 68 years old, I bitterly realized that blood ties aren't always a guarantee of safety. Sometimes it is just a pre-printed medical power of attorney, waiting for me to sign, to throw myself into an isolated nursing home. I am Henrik. I have spent half a widowed lifetime trading sweat, blood, and sleepless nights to build a clean turbine tech empire worth tens of millions of dollars from scratch. But tonight, the ones carrying my blood, the children I raised, are sitting right in front of me, calculating how much I am still worth before officially crossing my name out of their lives. We are sitting in the middle of a Michelin-starred restaurant in the bustling Aker Brygge district of Oslo. The surrounding air is thick and suffocating. The smell of expensive smoked salmon, the scent of truffles, and the overwhelmingly heavy Tom Ford perfume radiating from Freya, my daughter, completely overpower the fake cozy atmosphere they tried so hard to stage. The clinking sounds of crystal glasses filled with premium champagne continuously ring out. Everything is sparkling. Everything is perfect. Except for my family dinner, Elias, my son, sits across from me in a custom-tailored suit from Italy. He loosens his silk tie with the demeanor of a superior, smiling a hypocritical smile perfectly trained from expensive business administration courses. He slowly slides a thick file, its paper edges razor-sharp, along with a Mont Blanc fountain pen across the glass table. Freya's carefully manicured fingers interlock, her eyes sparkling with a fake affection that is absolutely chilling. They begin their performance, using incredibly long, convoluted sentences stuffed with empty buzzwords about peace of mind, intensive medical care, and boundless love. They try to convince me that my mind has begun to rot. They say that my silence in board meetings is a sign of senility, that my health is severely declining, and that the fact I no longer eagerly debate is proof of a dying brain. They paint a ruthlessly tinted picture of a high-end nursing home hidden deep in the remote suburbs, where I will get absolute rest, away from all the stress of running the company. They play the act of filial children perfectly. If I were an ordinary old man, I might have shed tears of emotion or collapsed in panic under the massive psychological pressure they are creating. But blind arrogance always comes with fatal mistakes. As Elias reaches out to pour more wine, his latest model smartphone lying face up on the table vibrates slightly. The screen lights up. A message appears from a saved number named Vanguard Capital. My eyes, which they consider cloudy and senile, take exactly 1 second to scan those razor-sharp words. The $80 million deal is ready. Send the old man's medical power of attorney as soon as it is signed. The American Investment Fund will close next week. A freezing chill runs down my spine, freezing every blood vessel. $80 million. My entire life's work, the technical patents traded with my whole youth, are being sold off by my own flesh and blood in a secret backroom deal. They don't want me to rest. They want to strip away my control entirely, hijack the whole company, and lock me in a gilded medical prison so they can freely enjoy that massive sum of money. They are backing me into a corner, stripping away the last dignity of a father, tearing down every line of defense I have. Sign it, Dad, Elias says, his voice deep and warm, leaning forward, his eyes revealing an impatience he can no longer hide. This is the best thing for our family. That's right, Dad, Freya chimes in, placing her cold hand over mine, her red-painted nails pressing lightly into my flesh. We just want you to be safe. In that moment, I could choose to slam the table. I could choose to scream right in their faces, expose that filthy text message, and unmask their rotten facade and bottomless greed right in the middle of this crowded restaurant. I could act the part of an outraged father, sobbing because he was betrayed by his own children. But loud anger is only for the weak. True power never needs to shout. Absolute power is always chillingly, razor-sharp, and terrifyingly quiet. I slowly withdraw my hand from Freya's fake touch. My movements are slow, precise, and without a single tremor. I look down at the medical power of attorney, the cold legal words waiting to lock my life away. I look at the Mont Blanc fountain pen, sparkling with arrogance. I look up. I look at the paper. I look at my son. I don't sign. I quietly stand up, carefully button my wool coat, leaving the paper abandoned on the glass table. My absolute silence completely shatters their frantic rhythm, tearing apart the hypocritical atmosphere they had worked so hard to stage. The smile on Elias's lips stiffens, his jaw clenching. Freya awkwardly pulls her hand back, her expensive makeup seemingly unable to hide the flash of panic crossing her eyes. They still sit there, watching my back. They certainly think my departure is just the final stubbornness of a senile old man, a weak and hopeless resistance before being completely suffocated. They arrogantly think they still hold the handle, that the $80 million deal with the Americans is already in the palm of their hands. But their blindness made them forget a ruthless rule of survival. The one who creates an empire with his own hands always knows exactly every fatal weakness of that structure. As I walk out the restaurant door, leaving behind the suffocation of greed and expensive perfume, a massive net has already begun to be activated by me in the dark. They are about to sell a company worth $80 million. They are about to celebrate my downfall. But they have absolutely no idea that what they are holding in their hands, what they are preparing to trade, is actually just an empty shell. The real blade hasn't even been swung yet. 3 days had passed since the suffocating dinner at Acre Brig. 3 days of a chilling silence, but it was the silence before the most devastating blizzard of winter crashed down upon Oslo. That morning, I sat in the study of my wooden house, reaching out to type the password into the company's internal management system. The computer screen flickered for a second, before a cold red line of text appeared, striking right into my eyes. Account disabled. Please contact the Chief Financial Officer. I let out a hollow laugh, dry and without a single ounce of joy. Freya, my daughter with her perfect makeup and expensive perfume, had made her move. Elias and Freya didn't waste a single moment. They were bloodthirsty. They were intoxicated by the illusory power they had just personally stripped from an old man they believed to be senile. In less than 72 hours, they had removed my name from every important email chain, revoked all server access rights, and blatantly hijacked my office on the top floor of the headquarters. That afternoon, I drove through downtown Oslo. The car stopped 1 block away from the glass skyscraper bearing my family name. Looking up from the lobby at the glass windows of the executive lounge, I could clearly see their performance. They were throwing an early celebration party. Premium champagne glasses, sparkling under the lights, were raised high. Elias stood in the middle of the crowd, his custom-tailored suit hugging his body, a bright smile on his lips, pointing his finger in absolute triumph. Freya stood beside him, continuously clinking glasses with the puppet directors they had just promoted. They were celebrating the $80 million deal about to be signed. They were jubilant, believing that the biggest stumbling block in their way, me, had been locked into a medical power of attorney, completely stripped of any capacity to resist. They considered my silence at the restaurant that night to be submission, to be the pathetic and cowardly decline of old age. Blind arrogance had clouded their vision. They didn't understand that, when a man who used his bare hands to mold an empire chooses to remain silent, it isn't surrender. It is the moment he is counting every heartbeat of his prey. I turned the steering wheel, driving back to an oak cabin, hidden deep in the suburban forest. A place with no smart device systems being tracked, no security cameras connected to Elias's network. The atmosphere here held only the smell of pine wood, the freezing chill of ice and snow, and absolute isolation. I kneeled on the floor, flipped the hand-woven rug, and entered the code to open the underground safe. From deep inside, I pulled out a military-grade encrypted laptop, something that no internal IT system in the company could trace. Next to it were thick stacks of untraceable cash. I didn't call the board of directors to complain. I didn't report to the police to cry about the injustice. Those loud screams are only for the weak. I opened the laptop, established a virtual private network connection, and used that cash to hire the most ruthless, independent private forensic audit team from Zurich. It was a merciless, razor-sharp team that operated entirely in the dark. My orders to them were very brief and clear. Plow through the entire server system, peel back every layer of camouflage, every transaction, every sub-account of Elias and Freya over the past 3 years. Do not miss a single junk file. It took exactly 48 hours for those Swiss hounds to pierce through the rotten financial structures that Freya had painstakingly built. Late at night, the crackling sound of firewood in the fireplace suddenly shattered when a sharp beep echoed from the encrypted laptop. The first audit report had been delivered. The grey-blue light from the screen cast onto the wrinkles on my face. I clicked to open the file. My eyes scanned over the rows of data, the tangled spreadsheets, and then all my movements completely stopped. $12 million. A brutal chill that didn't come from the Nordic weather ran down my spine, freezing every blood vessel. $12 million. That wasn't a random accounting error. That was a fatal loophole. The son I raised wasn't just a scheming, greedy man stealing a company. He was an actual economic criminal. The audit reports laid it bare. Elias had continuously siphoned funds from the company's research and development budgets. The cash flow was deliberately split into smaller pieces, disguised under the covers of expert consulting fees, project expansion, and then routed through a series of shell companies before flowing straight into anonymous accounts at Credit Suisse in Switzerland. Elias had used my blood and sweat to feed the massive debts from his lavish lifestyle, his disastrous venture capital investments, and his bottomless arrogance. That was exactly why they were desperately craving to sell the company to the American investment fund for $80 million. This deal was absolutely not a business advancement or a strategic vision at all. It was their last life raft. Elias needed that massive sum of money to cover up the $12 million deficit before the board's periodic audit took place. They planned to use me as a scapegoat, throw me into an isolated nursing home to keep me quiet, and use my own money to buy freedom for their own rot. I leaned back in my chair. Not a single tear fell. The betrayal had reached its absolute limit, turning my heart into a lifeless block of ice. I pulled open the desk drawer, taking out a physical folder that had yellowed over time. The paper edges were rough and uneven. This was not company property. These were the original clean turbine core technology patents, the heart, the soul, and the only true value of this entire tech empire. Many years ago, when the company was newly founded, I had quietly established an absolute defense mechanism that no one, not even Elias's most cunning lawyers, was allowed to know about. A perfect hidden architecture. I had planted an automatic trigger clause into the intellectual property contract. Today, that trigger right would officially be executed. I accessed the independent legal portal. My fingers glided over the keyboard. Slowly, precisely, uncompromisingly, I transferred the entire ownership of the core technology patents into a blind trust named after my late wife, Valhalla Holdings. No one on the board of directors or the executive committee had the authority to touch this trust, and I was the sole beneficiary. The transfer process was completed in a split second. An approved notification popped up on the freezing screen. I closed the laptop lid. The clack echoed dryly in the empty cabin. Everything was done. The company that Elias was joyfully celebrating, the empire that he was preparing to sign away to the Americans for $80 million, now held absolutely no core technology. It had been drained of its life force from the inside. What Elias was holding in his hands was now just a hollow shell, a pile of worthless scrap paper. And tomorrow, when he smugly put his pen to the contract with the International Investment Fund, he wouldn't just be a family traitor. He would officially become a financial fraudster, setting a trap for federal investors. The net had been cast. The blade had been sharpened to perfection. Outside, the snow had begun to fall heavily, blanketing the ground in a ruthless white. Tomorrow morning, in the tempered glass boardroom, overlooking the freezing fjord, Elias and Freya would welcome the American investors. They would wear their most expensive clothes. They would confidently think they had the whole world in the palm of their hands. And I would be there. I would step into that room, not as a frail old father coming to argue, beg, or preach morality, but as a judge bringing the most devastating avalanche to bury them forever under the weight of the truth. The next morning, Oslo welcomed me with a bone-chilling cold. The sky was gloomy, thick with the dull grey of blizzard-filled clouds rolling over the fjord. The freezing air seeped through every layer of clothing, but it was nothing compared to the eternal block of ice raining in my chest. I stepped out of the taxi. Standing in the lobby of the tempered glass skyscraper, the headquarters of the clean turbine empire that I had dedicated my entire youth to build. The building stood tall, cold and proud, reflecting the Nordic winter sky. Today, on the highest floor of this tower, those who carry my blood are preparing to sell out my name, my legacy, and even my freedom in exchange for $80 million. I stepped into the executive elevator, swiping the backup keycard that I had hidden away for many years across the reader. The numbers on the electronic board danced, counting up from the first floor to the 42nd. 42 floors of expectation, 42 floors of betrayal. Every passing ting was a slow, precise heartbeat of a sentence about to be executed. The elevator doors opened. The 42nd floor was unusually quiet. All unauthorized personnel had been banned from this area to ensure absolute confidentiality for the historic deal. I walked on the thick wool carpet, not making a single sound. At the end of the hallway was the boardroom. All three walls were made of transparent tempered glass, overlooking the entirely frozen surface of the misty bay. From my position in the shadows of the hallway, I could observe the entire play inside with absolute clarity. It was a perfect picture of fake success. Elias was standing at the head of the solid oak conference table, wearing his most luxurious charcoal grey Amenegildo Zegna suit. Freya sat beside him, her blonde hair tied up in a perfect bun, holding an uncapped gold-plated Mont Blanc fountain pen in her hand. Opposite them were three men in black suits, the senior representatives from the Vanguard Capital Investment Fund, from the US. The thick, carefully printed contracts were neatly stacked on the glass table. The atmosphere inside the meeting room exuded absolute smugness. I saw Elias smile, a radiant, confident smile, leaning forward to shake hands with the American representative. He was playing the role of a talented young CEO, someone about to complete an $80 million merger deal, leading the company into a new era. Freya smiled along, her eyes sparkling with lust for the massive fortune about to be poured into their accounts. The American Investment Fund representative smiled back. He reached out and picked up the Mont Blanc fountain pen, its gold nib sparkling under the crystal lights of the boardroom, slowly moving toward the final page of the transfer contract. With just one stroke of ink touching the paper, my company would permanently change hands. Elias and Freya would become free millionaires, while I would officially become a useless old man locked away in a nursing home. That was the moment of peak power delusion. And it was also the moment I decided to crush it. I reached out and grabbed the brass handle of the oak door. Click. The sound of the heavy double doors being thrown open against the walls rang out suddenly, completely shattering the solemn silence of the room. A freezing draft from the hallway rushed in, sweeping away the suffocating smell of expensive coffee and greed. Every movement in the meeting room froze instantly. The Mont Blanc pen nib of the American representative stopped exactly 1 millimeter above the paper. 5 faces turned toward the door in unison. I stepped inside. I did not carry the appearance of a senile, frail, and resigned old man like the way they had described me in the medical power of attorney documents. I stood up straight, buttoned my ash-gray wool coat, my freezing gaze sweeping over each face. There were no tears. There was no loud outrage. There was only the absolute silence of a predator who had locked onto its target. The smugness on Elias's face shattered in an instant. His skin turned from a healthy pink to a pale white. Freya flinched, awkwardly dropping her phone onto the glass table, creating a piercing noise. But the survival instinct of manipulators is always very sharp. It took exactly 2 seconds for Elias to regain his composure. He immediately stood up, putting on the mask of a filial son, who had to deal with a sick father. He walked quickly toward me, holding both hands out in a coaxing posture, deliberately raising his voice so the Americans could hear every single word clearly. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Elias said, his tone rushed, convoluted, stuffed with condescension and hypocrisy. "I told the nurses at home to take good care of you. You are getting confused about the time. Your illness has relapsed again. This is not a place you should come to right now. We are dealing with incredibly complex business matters that your health absolutely cannot handle." He turned to the three American guests, flashing a forced, apologetic smile. "I hope you can forgive this incident. My father's mental health has severely declined lately. He frequently wanders off and has hallucinations. Please give me 1 minute. I will call security to take him back to his room to rest. Right now, we will continue the signing." Elias reached out, intending to grab my shoulder to push me out the door. He intended to use my very presence to reinforce the senile old man act he had painstakingly staged. I didn't step back. I didn't brush his hand away. I didn't even bother looking at him. My silence created a black hole that sucked dry all of Elias's loud acting efforts. I stepped past him, a slow footstep but carrying the weight of a mountain, heading straight toward the tempered glass conference table. I reached inside my wool coat. My fingers touched the rough, stiff paper surface of the folder. I pulled it out. A thick, heavy stack of documents. On the surface of the light grey cover was something unmistakable, a bright red wax seal, stamped with the national emblem of Økokrim, the Norwegian National Authority for Investigation and Prosecution of Economic and Environmental Crime. With a decisive motion, I threw the folder down right in the middle of the glass table. Thud! The impact sound rang out dryly, as razor-sharp as a bullet exploding in the silent space. It instantly cut off the unfinished cover-up sentence in Elias's throat. It completely smashed the righteous, upper-class atmosphere of the room. Every gaze, from the trembling Freya to the three American guests, was sucked tightly into the blood-red wax seal sitting right on top of the $80 million contract. The room fell into a vacuum state. No one dared to breathe heavily. I slowly braced both hands on the glass table, leaning forward. My eyes locked onto the American Investment Fund representative, the man still holding the Montblanc pen suspended in mid-air. "I advise you," I spoke up. My voice was deep, quiet, and colder than the layer of ice freezing on the surface of the fjord outside. "Don't put your pen down on that paper." The silence in the meeting room was now so thick that I could clearly hear the buzzing motor of the heating system on the ceiling. The Montblanc fountain pen stopped in mid-air. The American Investment Fund representative slowly looked up at me, then looked down at the bright red wax seal of the Økokrim investigation agency sitting right on the glass table.
"What the hell are you talking about?"
Dad Elias roared, the righteous tone of a young CEO completely shattered. He lunged forward, intending to swing his arm to snatch the sealed folder. "I am sorry, gentlemen. He has truly lost his mind. He doesn't know what he is doing." I slammed the palm of my hand down on the folder cover. Without a single shout, the pressure and my gaze pinned Elias's trembling hands tightly to the table. He stopped, his jaw clenching, sweat starting to bead on the forehead that was full of arrogance just a minute ago. I ignored the pathetic panic of my son, slowly turning to the three representatives of the American Investment Fund. When I spoke, it was not the pleading of an old father stripped of his assets. It was a sentence. "You gentlemen are about to spend $80 million to buy an empty shell," I said, in perfect, articulate, and razor-sharp English. "And if the ink from that pen touches this contract, you will officially become accomplices in a federal financial fraud." The chief representative of the investment fund slowly put the Mont Blanc pen down on the table. His eyes swept from Elias's pale face to my absolute calmness. "What are you implying, Mr. Henrik?" I pulled a legal asset transfer confirmation paper from my inner coat pocket, stamped with the watermark of the National Legal Portal, sliding it across the glass table toward the Americans. "You are planning to buy the entire core technology of the clean turbine system." I began peeling back the first layer of the cover. "But this company doesn't own them at all. 3 days ago, I activated a hidden clause in the founding contract. All copyrights, patents, and core technologies have been legally transferred into a blind trust named Valhalla Holdings, and I am the sole beneficiary of that trust." I looked straight into Elias's widening eyes. "Any signature of the puppet CEO standing next to you is legally worthless. He has no right to sell what doesn't belong to him." Elias stuttered, taking a step back, his thigh hitting hard against the edge of the conference table. "Lies. This is a lie. We blocked all of your access, Dad. You can't. It is my company." "Elias." I cut him off, my voice deep and soft enough to suffocate every sound in the room. "The one who builds an empire with his own hands always knows how to install hidden doors that parasites will never see." The upper-class, courteous atmosphere of the glass boardroom completely evaporated. Freya cowered in her chair, both hands clutching the edge of the table, her perfect makeup unable to hide her sheer terror as her millionaire illusion was shattering right before her eyes. But I hadn't stopped yet. Stripping away their $80 million was just clearing the path. The real punishment was just beginning. I reached out and opened the second page of the forensic audit report, flipping it toward the international investors. The numbers, spreadsheets, and cash flow charts appeared clearly under the crystal lights. "But that isn't the real reason you should walk out of this room right now," I said, placing my index finger on a bolded number. "The real reason lies here. $12 million. The American representative frowned, leaning forward to look at the sequence of numbers. "Elias isn't selling this company for any strategic vision or business advancement," I continued, my rhythm as steady as a blade slicing through each piece of flesh. "He is selling it because he is an economic criminal backed into a corner. Over the past 3 years, my son has siphoned $12 million from the company's research fund, splitting the cash flow through shell companies and transferring it straight into anonymous accounts at Credit Suisse in Zurich." "Shut up!" Elias screamed. He rushed forward, clumsily trying to use his hands to cover the audit report. "Don't listen to him. These are fake papers. He is crazy." But the survival instinct of old foxes on the Wall Street market is much sharper than the deceit of an amateur. The American investment fund representative didn't need to hear me explain further. He looked at the red seal of the Okokrim Economic Crime Investigation Agency. He looked at the chilling detail of the financial report. And most importantly, he looked at Elias's visually collapsing expression. My son's righteous arrogance had evaporated without a trace. His skin was pale as a corpse. Drops of sweat the size of beans rolled down his forehead, sliding past his temples and soaking the collar of his expensive dress shirt. His breathing wheezed in intermittent gasps, both hands trembling so violently he couldn't clench them. That was not the reaction of a CEO being slandered. That was the primal panic of a fraudster whose mask had just been ripped off right at the scene. The American representative instantly realized that he had just narrowly avoided throwing $80 million into a black hole of debt, and almost signed to guarantee a federal financial crime. Not a single word of argument. Not a single second of hesitation. The investment fund representative picked up the Mont Blanc fountain pen, clipping it into his vest pocket. He slammed the merger contract shut, creating a dry and ruthless slapping sound. The two accompanying assistants also immediately stood up, gathering their files with the speed of people fleeing a burning house. "I think we have nothing left to discuss," the American representative said coldly, not bothering to look at Elias even once. "Our lawyers will contact you to cancel the entire preliminary agreement. Good luck with the investigation agency, Mr. Elias." The three men in black suits took long strides out of the room. The sound of the oak door closing rang out dryly, locking my children tightly in the very glass cage they had built with their own hands. Less than 3 minutes. An $80 million deal, a future drowning in velvet, a perfect play had been burned to ashes in a mere 180 seconds. In the massive meeting room on the 42nd floor, there were now only the three of us left. The howling Nordic winter storm wind whipped against the tempered glass panes, but the air inside the room was thousands of times colder and more deadly. Freya was panting, both hands holding her mascara-smeared face, her eyes wide open, staring into the void. As for Elias, his legs seemed no longer able to support the massive weight of his despair. He took 2 steps back, bumped into the chair, and completely collapsed. His gaze slowly shifted from the blank contract to the red wax seal of the investigation agency and finally stopped at me. The illusion of power had been wiped out. The loud pride had been smashed. For the first time in his life, Elias looked at me not with the eyes of a son mocking a senile old man, but with the terrified eyes of a prey that had just realized the blade of judgment was pressed right against its throat. Every escape route had been sealed off, and this avalanche of paper and ink would leave them absolutely no chance to survive. The heavy oak door of the meeting room slammed shut, locking the three of us in a suffocatingly silent space. The Americans had left, taking with them both the $80 million deal and the glorious illusion of power of the people standing in front of me. The glass room on the 42nd floor was now like a vacuum prison. Outside, the Nordic winter storm was still frantically howling, whipping freezing winds against the tempered glass. But the cold out there couldn't compare to the deadly atmosphere freezing every square centimeter inside this room. Freya was the first to shatter. The facade of a proud, courteous chief financial officer was completely stripped away. She held her head, her trembling fingers clawing into her carefully styled blonde hair. Tears began to pour out, washing the expensive mascara down her cheeks in dirty, dark streaks. Freya backed away, hitting the edge of the glass table, her breath wheezing in, choked gasps like someone drowning at the bottom of deep water. But Elias was different. The instinct of a narcissistic manipulator didn't allow him to accept defeat immediately. His pale skin suddenly turned bright red. He braced both hands on the table, lunging toward me, his eyes laced with the red streaks of a beast backed into a corner. "You are crazy!" Elias roared, his voice hoarse, broken, echoing off the glass walls. "You just burned $80 million with your own hands. Do you think you will be left in peace doing this? I am still the chief executive officer. I will call my lawyers. I will sue you for sabotaging company property. You can't strip me of everything with just this damn piece of paper." He swung his arm, intending to swat the forensic audit report bearing the red wax seal of the Okakrim Investigation Agency onto the floor. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back, nor did I bother to raise my voice in response. I just stood up straight, looking right into the depths of his eyes with absolute silence. A silence that held not a single trace of pity, anger, or hatred, just a lifeless void. And right at the moment he met that gaze, Elias's screams died out. His hand raised in mid-air froze, trembled violently, and then slowly dropped. He finally realized. His last illusion had been crushed by my eyes. He suddenly remembered the $12 million of research funds he had smuggled through Switzerland. He remembered the red seal of the Economic Crime Investigation Agency. He wasn't just facing bankruptcy. He was facing the most ruthless federal sentences. No lawyer could save him from the ironclad evidence I had personally prepared. Elias's legs no longer had the strength to support the weight of the truth. He staggered back a step, then both knees dropped hard onto the expensive wool carpet. The self-proclaimed, talented young CEO, the man who just 15 minutes ago intended to throw me into a nursing home to hijack my empire, was now kneeling right at my feet. "Dad," Elias groaned. His condescending, righteous tone had completely vanished, making way for a choked, pathetic sob. "Dad, please. They will put me in jail. That $12 million, I will find a way to pay it back. I promise. We are family, Dad. I am your own flesh and blood. I am your son. You can't hand this document over to the police. You can't ruin your own son's life." Hearing the word family, Freya also lunged forward. She kneeled beside her brother, her cold, sweat-drenched hands tightly clutching the hem of my wool coat. "That is right, Dad. We are your own flesh and blood. Everything is just a misunderstanding. I am sorry. I am 1,000 times sorry, Dad. Please withdraw the papers. Please save Elias. You can't be this cruel," they cried. They begged. They used father and child bonds and blood ties as their final shield to cover up their rotten greed. Looking at the two children I raised crying at my feet, if it were the Henrik of 10 years ago, perhaps my heart would have shattered in pain. But that father's heart died on the night at the restaurant in Acre Brig, when they coldly slid the medical power of attorney across the table and smiled, saying that locking me in a nursing home was the best thing for the family. Betrayal always has a limit. When that limit is broken, all biological ties become meaningless. I slowly bent down. My hand was steady, without a single tremor, peeling each of Freya's tightly gripping fingers off my coat. I stood up straight, slowly buttoning my ash-grey wool coat. Every movement I made was precise, as cold as a pre-programmed machine. I looked down at the two people kneeling on the floor, delivering my final judgment, short and ruthless like a slash cutting off all boundaries. Family is a privilege. You stripped yourselves of that privilege the night you planned to lock me in a nursing home. My lawyer will deal with you. I turned my back, not leaving another single glance. I took long strides toward the oak door. Behind me, Freya's panicked wails and Elias's desperate cries of "Dad" echoed tragically, tearing through the thick atmosphere of the boardroom. But those noisy sounds could no longer reach me. The door closed, locking their cries inside the glass cage they had built with their own hands. Along the deserted hallway, the only remaining sound was the steady tap of my shoe heels on the marble floor. The rhythm of freedom. The rhythm of a man who had just personally burned the ashes of betrayal to be reborn. 2 months later, the Nordic winter darkness fell very early. I sat alone by the window of the oak cabin located deep in the suburban forest, far from the rushing noise of Oslo. The fireplace popped with warm crackles, chasing away the sub-zero cold out there. I lightly swirled the glass of aquavit. In my hand, the pale yellow liquid rippling, reflecting the flickering firelight. My clean turbine tech empire, the wealth I spent my whole life building, is now absolutely safe in the Valhalla Holdings Blind Trust. No one can touch it. And somewhere in the middle of the city, Elias is waiting for his trial date to receive his federal sentence for financial fraud and money laundering. Freya has been stripped of all authority, facing massive debt and boycotts from the upper class she once worshipped. They buried themselves under the weight of debt and an objective, cold legal system. I took a sip of the spicy liquor. Outside the glass window, against the deep black sky of Norway, the green light bands of the aurora began to appear. They curved, danced, silent yet brilliant, majestic yet serene. I leaned back in the leather armchair, cast my gaze into the vast space, and took a deep breath. No more betrayal, no more suffocation of greed. Only peace, silence, and an absolute departure remained. I had won, not through the noise of hatred, but through the silence of the ultimate boundary. Thank you for accompanying me to the final moments of the Oslo winter story. If this story brought you strong emotions, please hit like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue to meet in upcoming dramatic storytelling series. Before closing, I want to send you a message. Blood ties aren't always a guarantee of loyalty. Never trade your limits and dignity just to hold on to a family that no longer values you. Forgiveness can be a choice, but setting boundaries is a requirement. Don't burn yourself to keep those who use you warm. See you again in the next story.